Good morning. I want to welcome to everyone to our meeting today, which is meeting number 21 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Immigration. I want to, je veux commencer avec dire bien.
I'd like to start by welcoming you all. Warm welcome to Alexis Deschênes. Welcome to the team.
Special guest, the very honorable Greg Fergus. I want to say welcome to you as well. Thank you for joining us today. And thanks to everyone. I usually start promptly right at 11 o'clock, but it's been what they call a manic Monday. And so everything has kind of gone wrong. And so I appreciate everyone for their patience. Oh, we also have Mr. Vincent Neal. Oh, I want to say a warm welcome to you as well. Thank you. I'm sorry, I saw you at our last meeting and I thought you were already a normal part of our team, but let me also warmly welcome you here with us today. Okay, now today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and I want to make a couple of comments for the benefit of our witnesses, as well as just reminders, as always, to our members. For those that are on Zoom, and I see we have one with us in the first panel, just a reminder, and I'm sure that the technicians have already gone through this with you, please click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and kindly mute yourself when you are not speaking. As well, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, whether it's Floor or English or French. Okay? And if you have any questions, you just let us know. We could repeat that. And for those that are in the room, you could please use your earpiece and select the desired channel. Sometimes even it's easier to listen to all the testimony in English. Sometimes there's soft speakers on, in terms of the questioners. I'll also give you a bit of a warning, whether I'll say 1 minute left or I'll sort of say 1 minute with my finger if I see that you're looking at me, just so that you know you've got 1 minute left either. Probably for your 5-minute opening introduction, and to all of my colleagues around the table, just letting everybody know when you have a minute left of questionings. And of course, always wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And please, please, please do not speak over each other. It's very difficult for our translators to translate. It makes their jobs very, very difficult. And of course, all your comments are addressed to the chair. Members, you know to please raise your hand if you wish to speak, and the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can. Thanks to everyone in advance for your cooperation. So, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on September 16, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of Canada's immigration system. I would now like to formally welcome our witnesses for the first hour of our meeting today. On behalf of the Caregivers Action Samaritan Movement, we have online Laila Elcano, who's the founder. A warm welcome to you. In the room, we have two witnesses. We've got Emmy Tracker, Nino Melikidze, welcome. And we also have from the Sudanese Canadian Community Association, Rania Elfil. Welcome to you as well. You each have 5 minutes to give opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. And now I'm going to actually begin online with Ms. Elcano, if you want to begin for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laila Elcano. I am a former caregiver and now work in healthcare as a personal support worker. I am a community leader and volunteer, and I am the founder of Caregivers Action Samaritan Movement, or CIMM, an organization of caregivers helping caregivers. It is an honor to be invited as a witness to the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration for its study on Canada's immigration system. It is my hope that what I will share will assist you in this study. As a caregiver myself, I know firsthand the emotional and psychological strains associated with being a caregiver. Though I am fortunate enough to have a loving and supportive family to work for, the fact that I was not with my own family back then was hard enough. In addition to the feeling of uncertainty and the feeling of not having the control of your own life was at times too much to bear. Caregivers or care workers are the backbone of Canada's economy. They perform critical work essential to the Canadian economy. Without them, parents of young children will not be able to work. The children of aging and sick parents or elderly will not be able to be in the workforce if not for caregivers. Families with special needs children and people with disabilities rely on the support provided by the caregivers. Caregivers provide a sense of normalcy as they absorb the tasks and responsibilities that the family can provide to their loved ones. And it is just fair that these caregivers be provided a simple, smooth, and easy transition from workers to permanent residents, but the government is failing them. Canada immigration system has a family reunification program, and it is ironic that the system that allows the family reunification program is the same system that is tearing families apart. How many caregivers are there who are not with their children? One officer of Kasama Mo, who has 5 children, 4 boys, and only daughter, who is the oldest child. 2 years ago, her husband and the 4 boys came to Canada. Unfortunately, the only daughter is left in the Philippines. Why? Because she is over 22 years old. I believe, and I am sure all of you will agree, our children are our children at any age. They are our children for life. What is the daughter's fault to be not part of her family living in Canada? The sad part is the boys here can even post pictures of them enjoying dinner or lunch in a restaurant or any picture that makes their sister back home sad, alone, and feel abandoned. Another one of our officers, he was able to bring her husband here. The 2 children, no. Why? Because they turned 22. So the mother, after sacrificing so many years of separation, will grow old here with her husband while both of her children are back home. In both cases, a lifetime of emotional and psychological pain that they have to endure. Is this what family reunification is? Lucky are those who never experienced this. At the current situation of the PR application here, with all the delays, backlog, lack of concrete or solid pathways, a lot more caregivers will suffer from separation from their children because their children will inevitably become 22. There is also a great concern on the Education Credential Assessment or ECA. I remember in 2021, special discretion in the caregivers community, particularly for those who were already here when this requirement was announced. We even sent a petition to the then Minister of Immigration, Marco Mendicino, with almost 300 signatories to reconsider this requirement. The TR2PR pathway opened, and most of those who signed the petition were able to apply. Today, most of these caregivers are citizens now, and they are thriving, successful, and contributing to Canadian society. There is also a biggest concern, the language proficiency test through IELTS and CELPIP. During the LCP or Live-in Caregiver Program, ECA and language proficiency were never part of the requirement. But nonetheless, all the caregivers under the LCP are thriving, successful. Some are entrepreneurs or business owners and contributing to the Canadian economy and society. At the last round table I attended with the then Minister of Immigration, Honorable Mark Miller, alongside the Minister Ricky Valdez and then Minister Yara Sack.
Ms. Elcano, I'm so sorry. You have 30 seconds left. I need you to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. I have provided a written question which I will be asking here again at this area is that IRC should look into. What are the steps that you have taken to establish a scrupulous immigration lawyers and consultants who are charging exorbitant rates to vulnerable and desperate applicants? I have included a written brief with recommendation that hopefully may assist you in the study of Canada immigration system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Elcano. And now we're going to turn to Ms. Ellie Kidze for her 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair and members of the committee. I am one of the few tech entrepreneurs in the immigration space and run the largest Canadian immigration data aggregation consumer platform. Furthermore, I'm a product of the Express Entry system myself, having gone through it in 2018. From my unique perspective, Canada's immigration system is under strain, not because immigration has lost its value, but because the system has increasingly lost its focus. When Express Entry launched in 2015, its role was clear. It was an economic selection system built on ranking skilled candidates based on merit. For several years, it worked. It predictably selected the candidates most likely to integrate successfully. However, since then, it has begun to collapse. I want to focus on two interlinked issues driving this breakdown: the implementation of Francophone immigration targets and the mismanagement of skilled immigration categories. Let's begin with Francophone immigration. The federal government set an 8.5% target for French-speaking permanent residents outside Quebec in 2025, rising to 10.5% by 2028. Supporting Francophone minority communities is a valid objective. The problem is where this target is being applied. Because family, refugee, and humanitarian streams do not assess language, they cannot be used to meet Francophone targets. As a result, Express Entry carries the burden by default. This isn't made explicit, but it is the operational reality. And the impact is clear. In 2025, a significant share of Express Entry invitations, 42% of the total, mind you, were issued to the Francophone draws. Most were candidates outside Canada without Canadian work experience or education. At the same time, the Canadian experience class, the pathway designed for people already working in Canada, saw fewer and smaller draws. The disparity between the quality of the applicants was stark: a 529 average CRS score for Canadian experience class versus 422 for Francophone candidates. That is an over 100-point difference. This outcome is driven by politically motivated targets, not applicant quality. According to IRCC's 2024 Stakeholder Consultation Report, only 14.6% of respondents identified Francophone immigration as a top priority, while a strong majority emphasized economic and labor market needs. Despite this, Francophone targets have dominated Express Entry in 2025. And the result? First, Express Entry is being distorted and often fails to prioritize candidates with the highest potential to successfully settle in Canada. Second, Francophone newcomers are dispersed broadly across the country, often into regions without strong French language employment opportunities or settlement infrastructure. A more appropriate mechanism already exists, and it's called the Francophone Community Immigration Pilot, which aligns language objectives with specific regions that have the capacity and demand to support Francophone settlement. This is exactly where Francophone immigration outside Quebec can be pursued effectively. On the skilled category side, STEM has effectively collapsed. There have been no STEM-specific draws since April 2024, and 19 core STEM occupations, including software developers, engineers, and data scientists, were removed from eligibility. Meanwhile, occupations such as insurance agents were added to it, despite being a sales-oriented role. The healthcare category saw less than a third of the Francophone invitations in 2025, while suffering from incorrect skill prioritization within. The result is predictable. Canadian educated graduates in skilled professions, many already working here, are losing clear pathways to permanent residence. Canada is training talent and failing to retain it. These outcomes directly stem from policy choices that layer non-economic objectives onto economic selection tools. The brief we submitted to this committee outlines a clear course correction. First, separate linguistic and cultural objectives from Express Entry. Second, rely on targeted programs to fulfill Francophone immigration objectives. Third, restore the Canadian experience class as a reliable immigration pathway. And fourth, correctly structure and increase the priority of STEM and healthcare categories. Canada needs an immigration system where each stream does what it was designed to do. If it is to remain functional, we must return to first principles.
1 minute left.
Yeah. Long-term economic impact and high human capital prioritization. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ms. Melikidze. Next, we have 5 minutes opening remarks for Ms. Elfil. Please.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Rania Elfil, and I'm a board member of the Sudanese Canadian Communities Association. Since the war in Sudan began in April 2023, I have worked extensively with IRCC to advocate for humanitarian pathways for Sudanese impacted by the war, a tradition Canada has upheld for many communities in times of crisis. Sudan is facing genocide and the largest humanitarian and displacement crisis in the world. Today, I'm here to share our community's experience with prolonged delays, inequitable processing, and systemic disparities, and to outline how we can ensure no future community endure what we have. When the war began, we submitted a policy brief calling for multiple immigration pathways. Initially, IRCC focused on a family reunification pathway, recognizing the direct impact on Canadians and permanent residents with loved ones trapped in Sudan. The program launched after many delays 10 months later in February 2024. It was capped at 3,250 applications and later increased to 5,000. Sponsors were required to assume full financial responsibility and demonstrate substantial income or put tens of thousands of dollars in available funds. Applicants, many of whom had lost everything, were also required to pay high processing fees. As a result, our community transferred millions of dollars to IRCC, funds that could otherwise have supported displaced family members with urgent needs like food and medicine, putting immense financial burden on the community. Just a couple of days ago, a young community member, Munajat Arab, who had to work multiple jobs to help support her family in displacement, like many others, while waiting to be reunited with her family, passed suddenly in Montreal, leaving behind a grieving family and an enraged community. We met those financial obligations. What we did not anticipate were extraordinary delays. In the first 13 months of the program, only 9% of applicants arrived in Canada. In October 2025, it was stated before this committee that Sudanese applications could face delays up to 99 months. 99 months for people trapped in active war zone, displaced without work, stability, or safety is not simple delays. It's life-threatening. And approximately 7,000 to 8,000 individuals remain waiting. We repeatedly warned IRCC and honorable ministers that the prolonged processing in a conflict zone would have deadly consequences. Our committee tracked cases of applicants who died while waiting from violence, heat stroke, and lack of medical care. One Calgary sponsor applied in February 2024 to bring his sister and her 4 children. After months of delays, she was killed when her city was stormed by RSF forces. Her children remain unprocessed. These were not abstract cases. These were preventable losses. We were also deeply concerned by reduction of government-assisted refugee commitments, as in September 24, IRCC committed to resettle 4,000 Sudanese guards per year from 2025 to 2027. With a focus on women impacted by gender violence. By March 25, the commitment was reduced to 4,000 total arrivals by end of 26, effectively cutting the pledge to a third. An earlier request to waive the refugee status determination requirements to allow more Sudanese to access private and community sponsorship programs was capped at only 700 individuals. At a time when Sudan faces the world's largest displacement crisis, scaling back commitments sends a troubling signal about prioritization and responsiveness. We also repeatedly raised cases of Canadian citizen children stranded in Sudan. These children...
Ms. Elfield, just 1 minute left. Thank you.
These children often were the sons or daughters of deceased Canadian father and lived with their widowed Sudanese mothers. While the children are Canadian, their mothers required visas to accompany them, creating a barrier to leaving a war zone. We raised this issue in April 24, July 24, and many times after. And one Canadian child drowned in an IDP camp after displacement. Other children were hungry out of school and without access to medicine. Where there has recently been some movement in the file, it remains alarmingly slow. The Canadian Council of Refugees has documented that African applicants face the longest processing times and that African visa offices carry the highest caseload with the least staffing. Our experience aligns with those findings, and the issue before us is not simply operational delays. It is absence of equity, transparency, and consistency in Canada's humanitarian response. As a way forward, if I may say, just to conclude, IRCC should implement a standardized crisis response framework with clear service standards for active conflict zones, including urgent processing timelines and transparent benchmarks, Equity safeguards must be embedded into humanitarian programming from the outset, including public reporting on regional processing times and adequate resourcing for African visa offices. And IRCC should establish a standing protocol for Canadian children stranded abroad with accelerated processing and facilitated pathways for accompanying caregivers. And finally, a structured and transparent engagement with affected communities must be formalized to reduce uncertainty and prevent harm. The Canada's humanitarian system should be measured.
I'm sorry, you're over a minute. You're over a minute over your time.
Thank you.
So I want to say thanks to you for your excellent opening remarks, and thanks to our other two witnesses as well. Thank you. Now what we do is we do rounds of questions. The first round is 6 minutes. I'm going to start with 6 minutes from the Conservatives, followed by 6 minutes from the Liberals, and then 6 minutes from the Bloc Québécois. Mr. Davies, you start for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses on 3 very distinct and very important topics today, but all of them important to the work of this committee. But I would like to spend my time with Ms., if you can help me with your last name, Melagita. Thank you. You wrote a piece entitled "Rethinking Express Entry for Economic Growth," and I'd like to quote from this article. "One of the most significant shifts in Canada's express entry system is the quiet abandonment of the STEM category, despite its central role in Canada's innovation economy and long-term productivity. No STEM draws have been held since April 2024, and IRCC has given no indication when they will resume. I wonder if you could give us some insight as to why you think the STEM category for the express entry system was removed, and do you just have some insight into why that was removed, and at a time when there are well-documented shortages in many of the disciplines in that STEM category?
Thank you for the question. So we did some digging when we were writing that article. We had requested a couple of ATIPs. From what I saw in an ATIP from 2024, there was an instruction to halt all, by IRCC ministerial instructions, to halt all STEM draws sometime in 2024. I believe it said that there was no STEM draws that should have been conducted past the summer, but there was no justification provided in that ATIP. I can go back and look and see if I can find more data, but there was no information provided there. But this doesn't even begin to cover the entire issue, because a bigger part is that 19 core STEM occupations were also removed from the category, which is when we talk about Canada becoming a competitive nation compared to the United States, and topics such as artificial development and building data centers or becoming like a leading nation in terms of technology. How are we doing that if we removed every single occupation that is related to that direction from the STEM category? And the IRCC has not provided a single documented fact regarding why they are choosing to pause STEM. I genuinely have no clue. I'd be lying to you if I told you that I knew.
I wonder, since that decision has happened, has there been any measurable or noticeable declines in the number of people that are coming to Canada? Has there been any impact on the number of people actually leaving Canada as a result of lack of support in that STEM sector?
An incredible example. I spoke to a U of T grad literally a couple of months ago, stuck at 499 points for CEC because he has 2 years of work experience, civil engineer, working with a good job. He cannot get selected for express entry because the Canadian experience class scores were so high and there have been no STEM draws. And he told me that he's trying to utilize a special pathway to get another visa, to get another year of work experience in sufficiently so that he can qualify for the next CEC draw when it happens. And this is an example of a person that is a U of T engineer. We're talking about Waterloo AI grads that are choosing to go to San Francisco to get a job at a startup there, rather than wait for a STEM draw here and they're not qualifying for the CEC draws. So that's the impact, yes. It's actually quite measurable.
So would you recognize in the market that these people that can't qualify under the current rules are actually leaving Canada for the United States?
For the United States, yes. Others are going back home. Another one I know from Singapore said that she's just going to go home because why would she keep trying to struggle here when she's never getting selected for any of the draws?
You also wrote, or you made reference to the fact that we seem to have flipped the script on some of the categories that are acceptable under the new rules. For example, we don't allow trained chefs to fill the gaps in the Canadian market, but we would allow cooks. Can you explain the rationale behind that?
The rationale is that the system has been designed in 2015 and hasn't actually been redesigned since. So when you look at the points ranking system, it measures for very basic qualities. It measures for age, for Canadian work experience. And if you look at that, that means and when you also put a knock code, that is not really being divided up by the level of tier. So let's say a tier 1 and a tier 3 knock code under Canadian experience class would be ranked the same level. You don't get extra points for having a higher skilled occupation under the Canadian experience class or even in the trades draws. So the cooks and the chefs would actually be ranked equally under the trades draw because they both have work experience.
That's interesting, considering a chef has to go through many more years of education, experience, qualification, and passing actual tests. But
It's the same, actually.
is it? So,
1 minute, Mr. Davies.
all right, thank you. I'm interested in your perspective on, give me some examples of areas in the STEM sector that we need to attract here in order to be competitive in the years ahead. Because it seems to me that we are effectively shooting ourselves in the foot by not having a system that attracts the most talented people that can actually contribute to our economic growth. So give me some of the areas that you think are lacking or they've been excluded.
I mean, Canada has one of the best education systems in the world. We have the University of Waterloo here, which the joke in the US is that San Francisco is a University of Waterloo wrapper, because that's how many Waterloo grads go and start startups there. So the type of people we need to be attracting is the type of people that are actually leaving because they don't want to rely on this immigration system and they cannot rely on this funding landscape in order to build something successfully. We're talking about engineers, we're talking about AI scientists, we're talking about researchers in the tech space, people that actually want to build tech in Canada to make us competitive, to make us a new technology hub. We were that before. Toronto used to be one of the best cities for startups and for technology development in the world, but we started going a little bit downhill recently.
I know I don't have much time, but just one follow-up. How does investment capital, relate to this problem? You said that there's an outflux of people going to California. Is it in addition to not being able to get this qualification, a capital-based issue as well?
It absolutely is, and I'd probably need another half hour to dive into that, but I'm happy to talk to you after. Capital is a very big problem. Access to capital, removing bureaucratic barriers, we can get into that in more detail, but one thing that Canada did well before is at least it promised these people an immigration pathway, and that's also no longer available.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Thank you, Ms. Malikidze. Thank you. It's a great last name. It's almost as great as my last name. We are having a little bit of technical issues with Ms. Elcano. Ms. Elcano, just because I want to make sure that we try our best to include you as part of this conversation, can I just maybe get you to say hello for just a couple of words? Just tell me what the weather's like where you're at. See if we can bring you on board. If not, unfortunately, you'll have to sort of add whatever additional testimony to, in written format. So perhaps you could try, Ms. Elcano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you hear me.
So hold on for a second. How's our translators on that? Are they okay?
Can't you say a few more words?
Maybe
please?
if you want to say a couple more words, please, Ms. Elcano, and just speak slowly and clearly, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And like I said, I hope you hear me now and it comes clearly.
Thank you. Ça va? Remy, is it okay?
I did not get the response.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, then we are going to Ms. Elcano. I'm not sure. I don't because I can't see our translator, so I can't see whether or not it's a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Sound is unfortunately not good for interpretation.
Okay. So I'm now hearing that the sound, even though you have the proper headset, you've done everything right, Ms. Elcano. I'm hearing that for some reason we're not able to get responses from you, and that is a problem that as a issue we've got to deal with ongoing. Just because I'm not quite sure how we will be able to deal with this without our full testimony from all of our witnesses.
I understand, Madam Chair.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay, so maybe if you hear anything that you want to contribute, please send it in written format after this meeting. And I apologize that we're not able to bring you on, Ms. Alcano, but I appreciate your understanding, and I thank everybody for their understanding as well. Ms. Zaid, you are up for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to all the witnesses. I had some questions for Ms. Elcano, but we'll start with Ms. Elfel. And if in case there is sound is okay or interpretation, please let me know. So thank you for coming today, and thank you for all the work which you are doing for the Sudanese community. Recognizing that Canada is working within a reality of lower immigration levels, within Canada's current family reunification framework, what specific changes, definitions, eligibility criteria, or processing flexibilities would have the greatest immediate impact for the Sudani families?
I think the delay at this point has impacted, at the beginning, a commitment was to bring those families by end of 24, beginning 2025. I don't think we expected that the wait will extend to 2026, where the new levels plan has been introduced. The issue with the new levels plan is this program has been placed in an others category, and that others category is very restrictive, with only 5,800 spots in 26 and then 4,000 spots in 27 and 28. And we're placed with other communities, other impacted communities that are already in Canada, while our families are outside Canada in an active war zone or displacement. So I think having a special initiative that really upholds the commitment of the fast response, humanitarian equals fast and prompt response, that brings all those family members as soon as possible to Canada, would be the best way forward, as committed in the past. And the new levels plan came in 26. They were not there in 25. Still, those numbers were not processed fairly in 25.
Thank you. So in addition to the Special Mayors program, are there any other spousal applications or dependent applications which are in the pipeline which are not happening?
There is.
Or it is just that Special Mayors program you are more concerned about?
One of the temporary measures that IRCC implemented at the beginning of the war was the acceleration of the processing of Sudanese applicants across multiple pathways. To be honest, we have not seen that materialized in terms of how people are coming across different pathways. We still see delays across the different pathways. So family reunification, the normal path, this path, group of 5, the normal one, not the one that was done specifically for the Sudanese community after the war with the 350 applicants, which is also delayed. So we see delays across the multiple pathways.
So where are you seeing bottlenecks in the system? Is it the processing or the biometrics, communications or coordinations, and what steps should we recommend to the government to address these issues?
There is no barrier to bringing people at this point. There was in the past an issue of no biometric center in Sudan that was resolved May last year. So since then, we've seen IRCC able, in some cases, especially in Sudan, to bring people very quickly, to process them quickly. So it's really a matter of will at this point. If IRCC choose to process quickly and I think the program gets removed from this very restrictive, prohibitive category in the levels plan, those families are able to unite very quickly. There is no processing barriers or system barriers. It's just numbers, because of numbers and levels plan, that those families are impacted at this point.
And the other issue which I've been hearing from my constituents is about, because a lot of the residents here from the Sudanese community have already put in the money which was the requirement, and they can't even use that money Is that the concern which you have?
That's a huge concern for the community at this point because the program had substantial financial requirements, unlike any other humanitarian program implemented by IRCC, where Sudanese families had to show either substantial income or put money in funds in banks. This money has been held for almost 2 years now. As families, they cannot access that fund because their families are either trapped in Sudan or in displacement where they can't work. Most of the families here are actively supporting their families in displacement. So that puts a huge financial and mental burden on the families here. And those are working Canadian, committed Canadian citizens that are really feeling unjust and unfair
1 minute.
processing to bring their families.
Okay, so just my last question for this round is that, like, you are monitoring like online the status. Is it the eligibility criteria for most of them, which is happening and is not been finalized, or is it majority of the files within the security process?
Most of them, a lot passed security and were pending medical, and medical was not sent. So there are multiple stages. I would say the majority of those files has passed eligibility, because when you pass eligibility, your file gets passed from Ottawa to Rome, and most of those files are currently being processed in Rome. They are being processed in Rome. A lot of those files has passed security. Some are stuck in security for reasons that are not very clear. But even if you pass security, medical is not
Thank you
shared.
so much, Ms. Elfil. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Zaid. Next we go. Maintenant, on a 6 minutes pour Monsieur Deschênes.
6 minutes, Mr. Deschênes. Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to the Immigration Committee, and I'd like to thank the witnesses who are with us today. I will start with questions for Ms. Melikidze. Can you hear me, Ms. Melikidze? Can you hear me now? Can you hear the interpretation? Madam Chair, I think we will have to reset the clock. Does it work now? Can you hear me? Okay, so you work from out of Toronto, if I understand correctly. Do you deal with temporary foreign workers who need to renew their work permits, for instance?
Less so. So, for example, with our company, we more frequently deal with express entry applicants as well as spousal sponsorship and citizenship. We have some work permits and study permits as well, but usually first-time applicants.
Et est-ce que vous opérez seulement dans la région de Toronto?
Do you only work in the Toronto region, or do you work in the rural parts of Ontario as well?
Our company is actually province agnostic. We are covering programs across all of Canada. The only one we probably don't have a lot of trackers for is the Quebec skilled immigration programs. The rest of Canadian programs we do have coverage for.
Parce qu'il y a un enjeu, et je recevais pendant que vous parliez.
So, as you were speaking, I received an email from my riding in Gaspésie. People are saying that work permits for temporary foreign workers are not being renewed. So we understand that the rules have become more strict in terms of the levels. I'm trying to understand your vision of things, because in the 2025 budget, the Liberal government is saying that when they are making the rules around TFWs more restrictive, they are allowing some flexibility for rural communities. So do you see that happening?
Personally, I will not lie, I have not seen a lot of applicants for the rural community programs because we still deal with more general programs like express entry, or like if we're talking about provincial nominee programs, we're talking about the biggest streams. That being said, when it comes to work permits in general, I don't know about exactly renewals, but work permits in general, we have seen the processing times go up significantly since 2024. Like if there was a couple of months processing time before, we're looking at 6+ months of processing time with certain work permits right now. So there have definitely been longer times and delays ongoing in that category. Study permits also have been delayed. I know, for example, the startup visa open work permit, you can't even apply for it now, and people that did apply before, their applications are getting canceled or are taking so long to process that it's close to impossible to get it. So from that point of view, I can speak to the exact question that you ask. I unfortunately do not have the data, but I can look it up for you after if you'd like.
De l'immigration francophone.
Now, let's talk about Francophone immigration. You referred to it, and you're not the only person to have talked about this issue. There's an article by Evan Green, who is an immigration lawyer, who also is saying that the guidelines or the levels with regard to Francophone immigration would be a bad public policy. The government has decided to increase Francophone immigration levels for political reasons, you were saying, but it's to make sure that French language doesn't disappear outside of Quebec. Because in Saskatchewan, for instance, we're seeing different kinds of trends. And the language criteria seems to be skewing a little bit the immigration system, is what some people say, but I'm trying to understand. Please tell us why is it bad public policy to have levels for Francophone immigration?
I actually do not think it's a bad public policy to have levels for Francophone immigration. I just think that it's being implemented incredibly incorrectly in a way that's actually hurting Quebec, first and foremost. If you look up the government's initial data regarding Francophone immigration, it's actually, and I can find the ATIP for this, they're saying that over 80% of those immigrants that come in under the federal Francophone programs end up coming to Quebec at the end of the day, because there is a lack of employment opportunities outside of Quebec for purely Francophone speakers. That being said, it's not a problem if they go to the Francophone communities, which is what I recommended in my brief as well, that they go to the specific Francophone communities outside of Quebec. But because they're coming in through express entry, they go anywhere in the country. It does not matter. And if you look at the level of qualification these applicants have, and they're generally quite low skilled, which is why I argued that regarding the point difference, they don't have the actual bilingual component, so they're not fluent enough in English to pick up an English-speaking job should it be needed. So what do you have? Then you have a flood of lower-skilled immigrants whose primary skill they got selected for, being French, come to Canada, look for employment opportunities outside of these Francophone communities primarily, and then being unable to settle successfully. So what we're recommending is that tie the Francophone immigration numbers to the Francophone communities to help facilitate the settlement and help them get employment opportunities so that they don't end up going to Quebec at the end of the day, because that's where they're more likely to find employment when they tried all the resources in other places.
Il reste une minute.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Et comment on fait?
1 minute left. Thank you, Chair. So, how do we go about bringing these people into Francophone communities? How can we achieve this result?
Community immigration pilot. This can be done in two ways. One, we simply need to be more realistic about our Francophone targets, because right now it's more of like a blind, we want this best case scenario, so we're just going to force it on everyone without thinking through consequences. Once we have more realistic numbers, we put them all into the Francophone community immigration pilot, and we direct all of these Francophone immigrants at a higher number. I think the cap at that program is 5,000 people now. Make it 15,000, make it 20,000, and direct those Francophone migrants to those communities where they can be absorbed and settled successfully.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Deschênes.
Thank you, Mr. Deschênes. And thank you, Ms. Melikitze.
So now we move to our second round, and just because we have about 15 minutes left, I'm just going to let people know. So we're going to start with Mr. Ho for 5 minutes, Mr. Zuberi for 5 minutes, Monsieur Duchesne, 2 minutes et demie, et après on a seulement 3 minutes. I'm going to give
Mr. Deschênes, 2.5 minutes.
Half minutes too. Is it Ms. Sodi or is it Ms. Zaid? It'll be Ms. Zaid. Okay. Okay, so please, Mr. Ho, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My set of questions are for Ms. Melikitze. What year was ImmiTracker founded? 2022. So, I mean, that time, have you noticed, or even before then, have you noticed, what kind of trends have you noticed with the immigration system?
So the trends that I noticed, first of all, I was a part of Express Entry back in 2018, 2019. And when I first came to Canada and I went through this program, it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. Like, I genuinely could not believe there was a country that was doing immigration this correctly. I remember I was telling all of my friends, I was like, this is incredible. They actually understand how to prioritize and rank skilled candidates and give them potential opportunities to integrate into the economy. After 2020, the immigration system became haphazard, and this happened for two reasons. There were a lot of one-time measures introduced as a result of COVID to kind of make up for labor shortages that were going on. Second, the immigration numbers got increased really blindly. Every year, if you looked at the immigration levels plan, they kept going higher and higher and higher. And third, there was a lot of ignorance of fraud going on. We all knew it was happening. I'm very sure that people on this committee have heard quite a bit about it when it started. But they didn't really stop it until it started to become such a big problem that they had to radically overcorrect and start like stopping a lot of programs in the middle of their tracks. So I would say the biggest trend that I would notice is that the ballooning of the numbers without thinking about the consequences and turning a blind eye to a lot of fraud.
So, in recent years, what trends have you observed regarding the STEM applicants within the express entry system?
Like I mentioned to Mr. Davies earlier, first thing is that the pause of the STEM draws, in my opinion, is a huge blow for a country that has universities like McGill and Mila, U of T, and Waterloo, because why are we not giving these people that have studied engineering, science, AI, a dedicated pathway to stay and integrate into our economy further? And second of all, because they're going through the General Canadian Experience Class program, the bar to meet those scores is incredibly high. 529, which was the average score for last year, is a very high score. You can have a master's and 3 years of work experience and you'd still not be reaching that score. So that's probably one of the biggest things I'd say, frankly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We're seeing the Liberals have effectively abandoned the STEM category, but instead added categories like insurance agents and brokers. And at a time where we have a productivity crisis, investment is fleeing. Actually, these are not talking points of mine. These are talking points taken from the costly Liberal budget that we are in a productivity crisis, and they seem to be moving in the opposite direction. So we saw the Liberals mismanage Canada's immigration system by pretty much flooding Canada with low-skilled temporary workers. So let's talk about high-paying, high-skilled workers. So are you seeing people in high-skilled fields paying taxes, contributing to our system, already living in Canada, and wanting to become Canadian and earning their citizenship? Are you seeing them being blocked from permanent residency because of the mismanagement? And name some examples, if you could.
Absolutely. I know so many people like that in Toronto personally. I've known them over the years, graduates of good universities that have finally seen the Canadian Experience Class points drop a little bit now, and that was within a month of the expiration of their work permits, their post-graduation work permits. These were people that were counting the days until their work permits were going to expire, and then they would probably have to pack up and go home because they were not getting selected in Canadian Experience Class. And again, I'm not even talking college grads, I'm talking university grads, 2 to 3 years of work experience. There are in high demand jobs. They already have jobs. They've been paying taxes every single year. And yeah, they basically had no opportunity to stay up until these last couple of draws.
One minute left, please.
We can go, like, there's jobs that have been related to UI, UX, marketing, engineering, software engineering as well. Like I mentioned, a civil engineer earlier. There was a variety, yes. But all had jobs here.
Yeah. So, we're seeing the Liberals broke the immigration system, and it's also we're seeing massive, unprecedented stress on the healthcare system too, on shortage of nurses, doctors, 6 million Canadians without a family doctor. Can you tell me a little bit about how the Liberals mismanaged the immigration system on the healthcare field specifically?
20 seconds, please.
In short, I believe the healthcare category is brought in too late, and I believe it is not being prioritized correctly within, and I'm happy to talk to you about those factors after this as well. And more importantly is that the numbers for the healthcare category were too low. Like I mentioned in my speech, they got less than a third of the Francophone spots last year. There was only 14.5 thousand invitations sent out to healthcare candidates in 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Melikitsa. Thank you, Mr. Ho. Anything that you feel you haven't finished or you remember afterwards, feel free to write to the committee. It's formally accepted and it is part of our study. Thank you so much. Now we have 5 minutes for Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to start with Ms. Elfiel, and thank you for your testimony. And speaking about a very difficult situation that's going on in Sudan, which, as you mentioned, is the largest humanitarian crisis right now in the world, and one that we are seized by. You spoke a lot about what's happening specifically within the program that you and others from the community in Canada are concerned around. I just want to ask more broadly, when it comes to Canada's immigration process, how do you think it can be improved for the most vulnerable populations that are impacted by armed conflict around the world? So it would apply to Sudan, but also other regions, if you have suggestions on that, and how we can improve our immigration process.
I'm not going to claim to be an immigration consultant or someone who's very deep into that, but I will speak out of my place in the advocacy space, in this space for the past 2-3 years. And I would say just having an adequate, Canada from the beginning had pillars for immigration. Part of those pillars is economic immigration, but the humanitarian part was always core to our values. And we always stood up for communities and impacted by war and created programs. What we see is lack of equity in the response to those communities. So having something that is really with a standard process and transparency that brings equity to how we respond to communities in crisis with targeted programs that help those communities. And I think the example of the Sudan Family Reunification Program is a great one because it really directly helped the community here, Canadian community here, that was mentally and emotionally impacted by the war and the direct impact on their families. And that is one to, I think, to replicate in similar cases.
Thank you. You mentioned in your testimony that biometrics were made available, and that wasn't initially the case. Could you talk briefly about how that made an important impact and change in terms of applications, processing, etc.?
A lot of the applicants for the program are in Sudan, and it was very difficult due to the safety situation for them to leave. There was no biometric center in Sudan after the war, and that impacted their processing as IRCC was not waiving the biometric requirement. So they either had to go somewhere to another country, which was not feasible for everyone, or just remain stranded in Sudan. We worked closely with IRCC, with their international crisis response team, to establish a biometric center in Sudan through IOM. So IOM is present in Sudan, and we actually came in with a proposal that through working with IOM, IRCC can solve that problem. It took very long, but at the end they managed to establish a biometric center in May of last year, and we're able since then to successfully process applicants from within Sudan.
So aside from the one proposal you made, which you also succeeded in achieving, do you have any other proposals you haven't yet spoken about that you want to bring forth right now?
I think one thing I want to raise attention to, and I will just build on a point that's said by the witness next to me, which is when you think about this community that is coming, you don't think about they're actually skilled. The Sudanese population is 50% and 50% under the age of 18. So what's coming to Canada is youth. What's coming to Canada is a very skilled in the majority because unfortunately, due to the prohibitive financial requirements of this program, those who are able to apply to bring their family members were skilled professionals in Canada who are actually bringing skilled professionals. My family...
30 seconds.
Really, my family sponsored 3 engineers who are currently in Canada, a civil engineer, an electrical engineer, both one in a PhD program now, one in a financial institution with a full-time job, and an architect who's doing a bridging program and part-time job. So what we're bringing is also skilled. This is something I think is overlooked and it should not be taken into account, to be honest, when we're talking about a crisis situation. But this is something also to be taken into account.
Thank you, Ms. Elfil, and thank you, Mr. Zuberi. Monsieur Deschênes, c'est à vous 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Deschênes, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Ms. Elfil, if you can kindly put your earpiece in. If you can, please let me know if you can hear the interpretation. So this morning in the National Post, there is an article that says that there are thousands of demands from asylum seekers, and these demands are being treated with no filters being applied. Have you seen this kind of a change in approach coming from the IRCC recently?
I'm trying to clarify the question. When you say with no filters being applied, sorry.
So the National Post article was saying that in the past couple of years, when there is an asylum or refugee claim that's being made for some asylum seekers, essentially from some countries that are listed from 2019 to 2023, there have been 25,000 asylum seekers who have settled without having had an interview with a public servant just based on the written file they submitted. Have you seen examples of such treatment?
I won't say that I'm very familiar with the asylum system and how it's working. I can speak to our community, and just after the war, what we've seen in some cases, they were processed without a hearing after the war based on the cases presented. So based on their cases presented, some, but very few, were processed without a hearing. Still, their ability to get a PR and to bring their families is very much restricted. And there's actually a huge struggle within that group who came here as asylum seekers seeking safety. And some of them came even before the war with their families stranded in Sudan, similar to situation to the family reunification, and they're struggling to be able to unite it with their families because, again, processing in terms of being given a PR so they're able to sponsor the family members is taking very long. It's actually, it's very long.
Merci, Monsieur Deschênes, and thank you, Ms. Elfil. That ends our first hour of our testimony today. I want to thank all the witnesses for their time, for being here. I apologize to you, Ms. Elcano. I think we need to do a little bit better on our side. You have done everything right in terms of the headset and coming in and trying to do a bit of a test, but we have to find a better way to guarantee that we can ensure all testimony while also respecting our interpreters. So thanks to all. We're now going to suspend for 5 minutes just to do a bit of a changeover, and the meeting is suspended. Welcome everyone to our Monsieur Deschênes, s'il vous plaît, asseyez-vous. Est-ce qu'on dit ça? Oui, vraiment? Okay. So welcome back, everyone. I want to warmly welcome our second panel. Thank you for being here. And I want to, as always, make a few comments for the benefit of our new witnesses. We don't have anyone online. I'm glad that everybody's here in person. Just know that please put on your headsets and try to do it in advance. It's easier to even hear in English as it is en français. Address all your questions, please, through the chair. And of course, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. And please make sure that you press whether you want to listen en français or in English. And then there's also the, how loud you would like it to be. I'll also, as you saw earlier, I'll let everybody know when there's about a minute left. And if I miss the 1 minute mark, I usually say 30 seconds. And I think with that, I'm just going to now formally welcome our witnesses for the second panel. We have, as an individual, Mr. James Youssef, a lawyer. From the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, we have Mr. David Pierce, Vice President, Government Relations. And from the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes du Canada, we have Ms. Leanne Roy, President, and Mr. Alain Dupuis, Executive Director. So each group will have 5 minutes to speak, and we're going to begin with Mr. Youssef for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation, and my thanks also to the C.D. Howe Institute for their support with the publication last month of my paper on the subject of a policy of the Immigration and Refugee Board called File Review. The File Review policy involves the rapid acceptance of asylum claims without conducting a hearing or asking any questions of the claimant. For example, between January of 2019 and February 2023, The IRB accepted 24,599 asylum claimants into Canada without asking them a single question. This policy remains in effect, and I think it's problematic for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's not worked. During the relevant time, the backlog of claims has increased from 17,000 in 2016 to 300,000 claims in 2025, an increase of more than 1,400%. The policy may also increase risk to Canada. The refugee hearing functions as a screen for national security risk and fraud. During a hearing, if questioning raises a red flag, the IRB board member must stop the hearing and notify the minister to give the minister the chance to intervene. But if the IRB is accepting claims without conducting hearings or asking any questions, those risks will never be detected. The minister's ability to intervene is nullified, and the risk to Canada increases. The policy may be interfering with the ability of board members to freely assess the evidence in their files in ways that are inconsistent with the law of administrative tribunals, by imposing a mandatory file triage structure in which persons other than the person with authority delegated by Parliament are assessing the evidence in each file and making implied recommendations to adjudicators. This interferes with the independent assessment of the evidence in their files and pressures board members into making fast, positive decisions without asking questions. Also of concern, the IRB appears to have implemented this policy on its own unilaterally without consulting ministers or cabinet, despite the fact that the policy has direct implications for the statutory mandates of the ministers of IRCC and public safety. And that shouldn't be possible. The IRB is an administrative tribunal that does not have the authority on its own to make policies that directly implicate the mandate of the Minister of Public Safety or the Minister of Immigration. For example, in the UK, France, New Zealand, and Australia, a policy change like this would have required the approval of ministers, cabinet, and possibly Parliament. And I think this may point to a structural problem with Canada's model. Canada's IRB may be too independent. It reports to no minister. And for that reason, it can't be seen clearly and its actions cannot be predicted. More broadly, the IRB's acceptance rate or recognition rate has now increased to 80% of claims decided on the merits, excluding claims which are withdrawn or abandoned. By comparison, in 2024, Ireland accepted 30% of claims on the merits, Sweden 40%, and Germany 59%. Research suggests that acceptance rates are a significant factor in asylum seekers' choice of a destination country. The IRB's extraordinarily high rate of acceptance may be attracting more asylum claims to Canada. In conclusion, I would make two recommendations. First, that the file review policy be brought to an end and the regular in-person hearing restored. Second, that ministers and cabinet should assume responsibility for asylum policy in Canada. It may be worth considering the transfer of the functions now performed by the IRB to a setting that places it within the oversight of government in a way that provides a sufficient degree of independence for each tribunal, but which also results in a direct reporting relationship to ministers and cabinet. That was one of the recommendations for the Refugee Protection Division in the independent review commissioned by the Trudeau government in 2017, and I think that's a good option, worth considering for the 4 tribunals that comprise the IRB. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have 5 minutes for opening remarks for Mr. Pierce from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Please, Mr. Pierce.
Great. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to come and appear before you today on behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and our new Immigration Council to provide testimony to your study on the immigration system. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce is the country's largest business association with an active network of 400 chambers across the country, representing nearly 200,000 businesses. We exist in almost all sectors and across almost all regions, and certainly most ridings in Canada. Immigration is a key driver of economic growth in Canada. For thousands of businesses, temporary and permanent immigration is not optional. It's an economic imperative. That economic imperative became even more relevant last January with the inauguration of the current U.S. administration. Since then, Canadian businesses are under strain due to the real or potential risk of tariffs that might shut down their sector. They're under strain because of aggressive changes to U.S. tax policy, and they're being asked to diversify to markets that they haven't before. At a time when Canadian businesses are having to compete in ways they haven't before, adding one more challenge, a shrinking workforce, may be a bridge too far for Canadian business. This in turn would force businesses to make difficult decisions, to reduce services, to stop producing goods, or worse, to shift their business to jurisdictions where they can access labor. When I joined the Canadian Chamber last January, I've had the chance over the past year to meet with most of our members. And I can tell you from meetings with them, their top 3 issues always include access to skilled labor or access to immigration to grow our economy. It's also in their top 3 risks. The simple fact is we have an all-time low fertility rate, coupled with a rapidly shrinking labor pool due to an upcoming wave of retirements across critical sectors across our economy. The simple fact is we have a demographic problem. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce and our members recognize that over the past few years, rapid and disproportionate population growth in certain communities across Canada has placed pressure on housing, infrastructure, and social services. But we must draw to your attention the fact that those pressures are not experienced equally across our country. In many rural and remote communities, as well as specific sectors of our economy, employers continue to face persistent and structural labor challenges. Examples include Thunder Bay, much of Northern Ontario, regions of Quebec, Atlantic Canada, and across the West. Our immigration system must reflect the full range of labor market needs, high-skilled, mid-skilled, and low-skilled labor across rural and urban centres. Based on the research of our Business Data Lab, approximately 1% of Canada's labour force are made up of temporary foreign workers. Yet they play a critical role by addressing shortages in agriculture, food processing, construction, hospitality, manufacturing, and healthcare. Now, let me be clear. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce firmly believes that a qualified Canadian should have and be able to compete for a job in Canada. Those jobs should go to Canadians and permanent residents who want them and who are qualified to do that work. But I hope we can all agree that if those conditions do not exist, where a qualified Canadian does not want that job, then a qualified Canadian business owner should be able to find the skilled workers they need through a program like the Temporary Foreign Worker Program to avoid being forced to reduce production, relocate, or close. For the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of criticism of the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and much of it is rightly so. The program's delivery, certainly over the past few years, has been a challenge for employers, no doubt for Canadians, and especially those coming in through the program. But that should not undermine the need, the imperative that Canada has for an immigration program that enables employers to access labor that is not available domestically. The multiple and reactive immigration policy changes over the past few years, such as the postgraduate work permit changes, changes to the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, and reduction to immigration levels more generally, have created significant uncertainty and negatively impacted businesses and communities across the country. Together, the effect has been to erode Canadians' trust in the system, while also damaging Canada's reputation abroad as a destination for the best and brightest. Businesses and Canadians need to put certainty and predictability back at the centre of our immigration system. On behalf of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and our Immigration Council, we are eager to support you in doing just that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pierce. Next, we have 5 minutes for the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes du Canada. Qui commence? Okay, Madame Roy.
Ms. Roy, please go ahead. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'd like to thank you for inviting the FCFA to appear before the committee today. My name is Liane Roy, and I'm accompanied by our General Manager, Alain Dupuis. For 50 years, the FCFA has been the national and international voice of Francophones and Acadians living in minority situations in 9 provinces and 3 territories. The FCFA is at the head of a network of several hundred Francophone organizations and institutions across the country. It is the federal government's point of contact for all matters relating to the vitality of our communities. In 2001, the FCFA and its network made Francophone immigration a national development priority for our communities. The FCFA quickly assumed national leadership in this file. In 25 years, our communities have made tremendous progress. For instance, every province and territory now has at least one French language reception and settlement service. In terms of recruitment, the record is improving, but remains mixed. In 2003, the government and communities jointly adopted a target of 4.4% for Francophone immigration into minority communities. It took 19 years to reach this target. In the meantime, there were several years of stagnation, where barely 2% of immigrants admitted outside Quebec were French-speaking. The federal government relied on general immigration instruments to reach the target without specific mechanisms to achieve it. Yet the FCFA and its network have insisted for years that we need programs designed specifically for French-speaking immigrants. The government gradually changed the score given to candidates in express entry to candidates who spoke French. This was part of the reason we were able to reach our target of 4.4% by 2022. But by then, we had fallen behind. For a generation, Canada's French-speaking community was deprived of the immigration it needed to vitalize and renew itself. This led to a more rapid decline in the demographic weight of our communities. A statistical study commissioned by the FCFA revealed that to halt and reverse the demographic decline of our communities, targets of 12% by 2024 were needed, and then gradually increasing to 20% by 2036. The Official Languages Act, modernized in 2023, commits the government to act to restore the demographic weight of our communities to what it was in 1971. As a result, the government adopted its first Francophone immigration policy in early 2024. It has also revised upwards its Francophone immigration targets. By 2025, the proportion of French-speaking immigrants admitted outside Quebec was set at 8.9%. Current tools, such as ensemble-based selection in the Express Entry program, appear insufficient to achieve higher Francophone immigration targets. In addition, these tools lead to a concentration of Francophone immigration in two provinces, Ontario and New Brunswick. But all of our communities want to benefit from Francophone immigration. The policy, launched in 2024, promises the creation of an economic immigration program specific to the Francophonie. This program will match immigrants with labor needs, particularly in regions and rural areas where the needs are great. It will help retain these immigrants in areas where jobs are available. 1 minute. It will ensure that criteria are better adjusted to the socioeconomic realities of French-speaking source countries, particularly in Africa. And finally, it will increase the bilingual capacity of Canada's workforce, an important competitive advantage at a time when our country is seeking to diversify its markets, particularly with the 90 member states and governments of the Francophonie. We therefore recommend that this committee ask the government to accelerate the implementation of an economic Francophone immigration program in close collaboration with our communities so that it comes into being in 2026. In this way, the IRCC will have all the means necessary to increase Francophone immigration to the country in line with its obligations under the Modernized Official Languages Act. Thank you, and we are ready to answer your questions. Thank you for your opening remarks.
We're going to begin our first round of questions, but I forgot to mention this at the onset. The last few minutes of our meeting is going to be taken up with a supplementary estimate motion, so just want to let everybody know that I'll be ending a few minutes early. Okay, first round of questions, it's 6 minutes, and we are going to begin with Mr. Redekop, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Youssef, I'm going to start with you. I really hope I heard you wrong, so I want you to clarify. You were talking about the file review program. That's the program where in the Immigration and Refugee Board where asylum claimants come to Canada, and you're just repeat that for me. Are you saying that file reviews do not actually, those claimants do not talk to an interviewer?
The claimants are accepted without a hearing taking place or any questions being asked.
Okay, so Canada is accepting asylum claims on paper without actually talking to the claimant. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so that must be from countries where we trust people inherently or something. What's the logic there from the countries that we accept people from?
When the policy was publicized in January of 2019, it was accompanied by a list of countries, and then about a year and a half later, that list came down. But the policy remains operable. But for the initial list, the list was comprised of countries that had an acceptance rate of 80% or higher as a threshold, and presumably additional criteria.
What kinds of countries were on that list?
Well, it would be dangerous countries because if a country has an acceptance rate for asylum claims of greater than 80%, that would tend to indicate that there's significant sources of potential risk for asylum seekers from those countries.
Russia, Afghanistan, those kinds of countries, are we talking?
So the lists evolved over time. I've attached a sample of one of the lists to my paper. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Okay, but so what you're saying is that Canada could theoretically, under this file review process, admit an asylum claimant from, let's say, Afghanistan without actually ever talking to that person, with that person never talking to an interviewer, not being interviewed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
And does that make you uncomfortable? Because it sure makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it's problematic.
Wow. So you also talked about the acceptance rates. And can you talk a little bit more about that? You're saying that our acceptance rates in Canada are quite high right now relative to where they have been traditionally and also relative to peers. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
The acceptance rate or recognition rate refers to the percentage of claims that are accepted measured against the total of accepted and rejected claims. And in 2024, that number was 80%, 79.8% for Canada. So it's now among the highest, perhaps the highest in the world.
What are some countries for comparison?
In 2024, Ireland accepted 30%, Sweden accepted 40%.
Wow.
Germany accepted 59%.
So you're saying our peer countries are accepting 30 to 40% of asylum claims, and we're accepting 80%? That's what you're?
We're accepting a lot more.
Wow. Does that concern you? Because that seems like that concerns me.
So there's research that suggests that a disproportionately high acceptance rate may have the effect of attracting additional asylum claims to Canada, or I would put it another way: perceptions of the likelihood of success and acceptance rates have been shown to have an effect on the selection by asylum seekers of the forum in which they choose or the jurisdiction in which they choose to make their claim.
Yeah, so when the Liberals tweeted out, come to Canada, we'll welcome you in, and then basically we don't have any very low rejection rates, I can see why that would attract a lot of people. That makes sense. So it seems like there's a lot of problems potentially within the Immigration and Refugee Board. Do you think it would be helpful for us as a committee to actually invite them to this committee to talk to them and ask them some of these questions?
I think perhaps that would be helpful.
What kind of questions would you suggest we ask them?
I don't think I should presume to suggest what questions you might ask.
What would you ask them if you could ask them?
I would ask them to end the policy of accepting asylum claims without asking any questions.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So do you think that we had proposed some amendments to C-12, for example, not allowing asylum claims from people who have transited through a G7 or an EU country. Basically, if you lie to an officer, you would be immediately not able to claim asylum.
1 minute left.
Do you think reforms like that would be helpful to our system?
I'll just comment briefly on the idea of having designated countries. So that was a policy, a designated country of origin policy was contained in the Balanced Refugee Reform Act of 2010. And I think to me that's significant because that was during a minority parliament, and it was legislation that was passed with the support of all parties in the House of Commons. And it contained a variation on a way of partially restricting access to Canada's asylum system on the basis that the claimant may be coming from a safe or relatively safe country. So it's an idea that has had some success in Canada's Parliament previously.
Thank you so much, Mr. Redekop.
Not much time.
Next we have 5 minutes for Ms. Sodi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. My first question is to you, Madam Roy. You recently emphasized the benefit that Canada has in having a bilingual workforce in both English and French, and how the Francophone immigration targets contribute to this. Can you explain further your thoughts on the economic benefits that Canada sees by having a bilingual workforce?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. In our opinion, Francophone immigration outside of Quebec needs to first and foremost respond to the economic needs of the Francophone minority because we have labor shortage in key areas such as education. We need at least 15,000 French language tutors and teachers outside Quebec. So if you want to have a bilingual Canada, we need qualified teachers. We also have thousands of spaces or places not available outside of Quebec in kindergarten services. And so these are the two key sectors for the future of bilingualism in Canada. There is also potential to develop bilingualism in other sectors. We know that in transportation and tourism, for instance, bilingualism is necessary to better serve Canadians, but we also can rely on making more sectors of the economy bilingual in all territories and provinces because we're diversifying the Canadian economy, and the more we use the bilingual advantage of Canada, the more we'll be able to diversify our markets. Ms. Roy was saying this. There are 90 governments within the Francophonie, and they work in French and speak French. So in our opinion, it's important to support bilingualism in Canada.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Madam Roy? Okay. I'll learn how to roll the R properly one day. But you've been clear that Francophone minority communities outside Quebec are facing a huge demographic decline, and that immigration plays a central role in reversing that trend. In January, the Minister of Immigration announced that Canada will exceed its 2025 target, reaching 8.9 of the 8.5% target, and that this target will continue to increase up to 10.5% in 2026. From your perspective, what message does exceeding the 2025 target send to the Francophone minority community across the country? And looking ahead, if Canada continues to meet or exceed these targets, what impact could that have on the vitality and long-term sustainability of Francophone communities over the next decade?
Merci pour votre question. Le fait qu'on a
Thank you for your question. The fact that the target has been revised in 2025 is a good sign. It's a step in the right direction, but unfortunately this comes after many years of delay. So from 2003 to 2019, we were not able to meet the 4.4% target. So we are now trying to make up for this, for the loss in terms of the demographic loss in our communities and the different regions. So it's very important to make sure that we, this time around, will be able to meet the targets, but also to set even more aggressive targets to be able to help with the vitality of our communities. The Prime Minister has announced, or will announce, a 12% target. But we think that we should go even beyond that to be able to catch up for all those years where we did not meet the targets. The Official Languages Commissioner had a study a couple of years ago which was showing that the gap in our communities, because we had not been meeting the targets for 2 decades, was about 73,000 people. So we are still playing catch up, and we need to meet the targets, yes, but we need to have even more aggressive targets.
The FCFA has emphasized that that ambition in setting Francophone targets must also be matched with implementation. In practical terms, what are the most important tools or mechanisms that you feel will help translate a national target into tangible results on the ground?
Question qu'on parle souvent. Donc,
well, we often talk about this issue. We need to have a Francophone optic in existing programs at the IRCC, but also there is a policy launched by the government, a Francophone immigration program launched in 2024. They're referring to a separate economic immigration pathway for Francophones. And for us, this program is very important. It needs to be it needs to be set up as quickly as possible, because a separate immigration program for Francophone communities would send a strong message towards increasing Francophone immigration, and this would be an ongoing commitment towards the vitality of our communities, and this would be in line with the Francophone immigration targets, and this would again be a detailed program in line with the reality on the ground, as also described by the Official Languages Act. As I was saying in my opening remarks, the law, the Official Languages Act was revised, and it refers to going back to the demographic weight of 1971. Thank you very much. Up next, we have 6 minutes for Mr. Deschênes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Youssef, do you speak French? I'll have questions for you. A little bit? Okay. So, thank you, because your contribution is very important today. You are talking about a way of doing things that not many people have heard about, in my opinion. So, if I understand this correctly, asylum seekers, Canada started to receive more and more demands over the years. And at the IRB, the thinking is that, well, there is more work, so we're going to lessen the workload, just let go of the security checks. So within a timeline of 4 years, we are looking at 25,000 asylum seekers who never met an official. No questions were asked to them, and they only were subject to a file review. And this is something that did not exist before 2019. Is that so?
That's correct. The system was there were substantial investments and reforms to the system in 2010. The new system was implemented in 2012. The key to those reforms was that the IRB maintain a certain level of claim finalizations each year. Between 2012 and 2017, the IRB was unable to meet those targets, and a second backlog had emerged. And then I think this is an important detail to understand. In 2017, the Trudeau government commissioned an independent review because of this continued inability of the IRB to stay on top of its backlog and meet its promised level of claim finalizations. And the Trudeau government appointed former Deputy Minister Neil Yates to lead an independent review of the asylum system. And Mr. Yates was considering all options. His report was published in 2010, and the two main options were leave it as is, or what he referred to as major structural reform, i.e. take the Refugee Protection Division from the IRB and move it to IRCC so that it would be fixed in a reporting relationship to a minister, so that ministers and cabinet would have oversight, and IRCC would just have better control over this problematic aspect of the system. So in 2017, the IRB was under immense pressure to quickly produce an increase in its rate of finalizations. And it was using this policy tool that I've been describing that they were able to do that.
So the security controls are set aside, and through an ATIP request, you're now able to tell us that there have been 25,000 people who never had a meeting with an official, and this went on until 2023. Do you know if this is still current practice?
Yes. So the extent of the disclosure that you referenced was January 2019 to February 2023. And that's right. The number during that period of time was, as you've said, just under 25,000.
Okay.
The policy is ongoing.
C'est toujours le cas.
And just to your question about security, so there is front-end security screening. However, the IRB itself is required to act as a kind of security screen to notify the Minister of Public Safety or the Minister of Immigration if an issue comes up during questioning that raises a security flag or a program integrity flag. They must notify the minister. But if they don't conduct a hearing and they don't ask any questions, that can't happen.
So the countries, we're talking about some of the countries where you have high criminality, and now this requirement is no longer necessary. So why is it important to have in hearings or contacts with individuals before this policy, at least before they come to Canada? Why was that important?
You're asking about contact with claimants before they come to Canada? Or you're asking about why is it important to conduct hearings?
Pourquoi est-ce que c'est la deuxième partie? Pourquoi est-ce que c'est important de faire...
The latter. Why is it important to have hearings?
So because every asylum application, as it's written, will always contain a narrative, a story, which, if it's accepted by the IRB, will meet the test for refugee status. In other words, you can't tell whether a claim is true or false just by looking at the written paper application. The only way to do that is by asking questions.
Maître Youssef, quel est l'effet que ça a eu?
So you seem to be saying, well, rather, what was the impact, because this information came out and it's known globally that people can apply here and there are no security checks?
I think it's possible that this policy may have had the effect of attracting more asylum claims to Canada. I also think that having an acceptance rate of 80% may also be acting as a pull factor, attracting more asylum claims to Canada.
Thank you, merci, Monsieur Deschênes. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Deschênes. Thank you, Mr. Youssef.
It's left for this round. I'm going to give 4 minutes to Ms. Rempel-Garner, 4 minutes to Mr. Zuberi, and 2 minutes à Monsieur Deschênes. Okay, Michelle Rempel-Garner, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just to summarize, Mr. Youssef, when I saw the list come out in 2019, I assumed that this was a way for the Liberals to quickly clear the backlog, or attempt to. Would you characterize the list system that you talked about as a way to clear the backlog, essentially? That was likely the motivation.
The country list was published by the IRB. It was not published by the Liberals or the Government of Canada. And I think, to me, that actually points to one of the more concerning aspects about this,
okay,
which is that the IRB unilaterally implemented this policy.
Okay, so I've heard enough on this. Our study, I'm going to move this. I move that, having regard for the February 23rd, 2026 National Post article entitled "Overwhelmed by Asylum Claims, Ottawa Coped by Ignoring Security Protocol," and further to its study on Canada's immigration system, that the committee invite the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada to appear before committee for 2 hours at the earliest opportunity and no later than Wednesday, March 11th, 2026. My rationale for moving this motion is as follows, colleagues. The study that we're undertaking right now is to examine ways to improve the order, fairness, and effectiveness of Canada's immigration system. And a point under that was the asylum system. We've heard here today that the IRB made a unilateral decision potentially to expedite asylum claims from a list of countries that may have put Canadian security at risk. And I think they need to come to the committee to answer what exactly happened here. Otherwise, I think that we're going to continue to just have numerous news stories on this, and I'd like to get them on the record. This is very concerning, and this would also be in alignment with our study. It could just be another witness list as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that motion, Ms. Rempel-Gardner. Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suggest that we take a moment to suspend in order to have conversation around this idea and motion. And given that it's been a surprise and we have to reflect on this.
Okay, I will suspend for 2 minutes. to speak to this? Monsieur Deschênes, anybody on the Liberal team? Est-ce que vous voulez parler de cette motion?
Would you like to speak to the motion?
Oui, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur Deschênes.
Quickly. I think that it's an important subject where there's new information that has come to light, and given the information provided by the witness, inviting the IRB would be a good choice and appropriate given the circumstances, so I do support the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Zuberi?
So thank you, Madam Chair. Merci pour le temps de juste faire un petit caucus.
Thank you for giving us some time to do a little caucus and to discuss the motion. We agree with the motion. We had a discussion, and that's our position, so we're ready to proceed with the vote.
Okay, so since it seems like everybody unanimously approves it, I don't think we need a formal vote or anything like that. We could just do, big thumbs up. Okay, so it looks like we formally approve of the motion. Mr. Clerk, you have that notified, which is great. I do see that we've come up against our time, unfortunately. Mr. Pierce, it doesn't seem that you have been able to answer any questions. But if we're going to go through supplemental estimates, we're going to need a few minutes to do it. Mr. Redekop, please.
Move that right now.
Yep.
Brad can do it.
Yeah, I'd like to make the following motion. That the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, along with the appropriate officials from the Department and the Immigration and Refugee Board, be invited to appear on the supplementary estimate C-2526 for 2 hours, and that this meeting take place at least 5 calendar days before the supplementary estimates are to be reported to the House.
Okay, any questions, Monsieur Deschênes? Anybody from around the table? Any questions? No? Thumbs up for everyone? Okay, it looks like that is great as well. I think with that, we have done a lot of business today. What I'd like to do is I want to thank the witness for their testimony today. Thank you for your contribution to our study. Mr. Pierce, please rest assured that your testimony was very important to us today. You didn't get any questions. But please, if there's anything that you've heard that you would like to contribute, please feel free to follow up in writing. We do take the additional testimony afterwards, and that goes to everyone. Sometimes you think about things that you would have wanted to have said but didn't say, and that would be important for us. And I think with that, I will call this meeting adjourned.